Ladies and gentlemen, we are delighted to have you today here to talk with Victor Menasce, the senior partner of Y Street Capital, about his best investments. Of course, you'll be aware that to talk about best investments means that you have to have a sample size to work with. You have to have significant opportunity, ideally over decades, to be able to talk through why these were ideal and not just flash in the pan returns, not just well timed market exposure, but something that is really substantial and specific. Victor will be here in a moment to share that with us. And if you heard some of our preamble that we discussed on Wednesday of this week, you would have learned that Victor has a specific view on discussing his best investments that will be helpful to share. He also used an analogy that I'll bring up when he arrives about the unicorns you find. Unicorn is a phrase that comes especially out of the tech investment world, is a company that goes parabolic and through the billion-dollar valuation at a certain rate, and that unicorn exists in the real estate world as well. But of course, real estate has some predictabilities to it that allow us to measure fundamentals at a more specific level. And so when you find those unicorns, he made a good comment that you have to lift that unicorn. And so we'll discuss that once Victor shows up as well. For those of you who don't know Y Street Capital, we are institutional developers of multifamily, self-storage, and land development. We cover all of North America, building in multiple markets. I think we're in maybe 9 states at the moment, probably 13 active projects at 13, 14, depending on exact timing of when you're accounting. And across all of those experiences, multiple asset classes, multiple markets, we bring a specific perspective to bear. When Victor comes, he'll give you a little bit of the history lesson as well. And you may have learned pieces of his investment history from when he was actually doing deals in states we no longer do opportunities in, we no longer pursue. And if you read his book, you would have picked up hints or clues of some of those amazing pieces of the track record. So we'll be excited to have him, and we'll take your live questions as well if we have time right at the end. One piece about discussing wins is that if you are talking about wins, the humility to discuss the lessons that had to be learned along the way is also a critical piece. I know that when your track record extends over multiple decades, you have the opportunity to have some pretty specific stumbles, and those stumbles also teach you how to find the opportunities that end up in the massive win category, not just the successful exit or the met pro forma return level, but at the parabolic level, at the unicorn level. So I think Victor will have a good take on that as well. At Y Street Capital, we present opportunities that we know are aligned with our investor objectives. And so some investors describe a great win as being a base hit. You hit pro forma returns. Perhaps you're on the debt side, so you're only going to make 6 or 8% per year, but you're not going to wipe the floor with yourself or your financial picture or your personal financial statement. You're going to maintain a certain equilibrium. And that's a win for the right investor. Other investors say, I want the unicorn. Show me the potential that I have to make a name for myself in the investment universe in only 1 year by making an investment that could quadruple or 6 times the money invested in a time period. And that's a win for the right type of investor as well. Some investors don't want anything to do with that. I do believe both of the projects Victor will speak to us about today will get into the higher level wins, not just the base hit, not the triple or the home run, but the grand slam home run, that type of experience. So we will look forward to the lessons he can share with us once he is with us. Victor will be joining us in just a moment. When you're working on multiple projects, every once in a while there comes an experience that says, I have to prioritize this even over the stage that I need to take at this moment. When our company really began to formalize and systematize our systems and measure, going back to see what wins have we had that are really worth talking about, we had to stretch way back into the history to look at the whole breadth of the landscape. And so again, for those of you who've only known about Y Street Capital for 3 years, 5 years, etc., you'll get to hear some stories from long ago. There are some more recent ones as well, but We'll take a sample from history and a sample from recent experience. Well, I think we're back. That was exciting. So, the tools that you use to stream into multiple locations can sometimes become unplugged. So, for those of you still with us, glad you're here. If you listen to a certain presidential candidate and a certain well-known billionaire advertise their viewpoints a couple of days ago, you'd realize sometimes these issues are pervasive. And here to join us now is Victor Menasce. Victor,
Great to be here.
can you hear us okay?
I can hear you perfectly.
Great. I was just sharing with the audience how sometimes the sample size has to be created in order to talk about a best investment, but also you have to have some experience in order to be able to categorize investments on the scale of great to perhaps not so great. So a great investor friend of ours says it's better to miss a bad deal than it is to make a great deal. Tell me a little of your perspective on that now.
You know, oftentimes people start with the deal and they think it's all about the deal. And one of the very early projects that I did in my career turned out to be a bad deal. And it's not because it was a bad deal, it's because it was a good deal badly managed. And so that made it a bad deal. So I ended up wasting a lot of time early on in my career for no particularly good reason other than I had attracted the wrong people.
Sure.
I think there's a powerful lesson in that. Oftentimes people are making it all about the deal, and it's almost never about the deal. It's like someone, hawking sunglasses from a trench coat. I got a deal. You you want a deal, and it's never about that.
So when you spoke with us on Wednesday, you described finding unicorns, and which is a tech investment word to find the unicorn, the
Yeah.
massive success. And you made the funny illusion that you have to lift the unicorn in order to realize the potential of a deal. So realizing that there is effort needed to make these deals succeed, why don't you tell us the story of the first opportunity that came to mind that you said this is a win?
It's one that we were absolutely not looking for. And let me give a little bit of background. So my partner and I, we had been building apartment buildings in Philadelphia, and he had a side business, also kind of a main business for him as well, buying and selling cell towers. And a cell tower is an asset. It's basically an easement, but it's an income property. So based on whatever revenue you get from the carriers, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, whoever, the value of that asset is based on a multiple of the income, just like any other piece of real estate. If we were to express it in cap rate terms, it's about a 7% cap rate. And he found a cell tower in rural part of New Jersey, about an hour outside of New York City. And about a mile from this cell tower was another cell tower. And attached to that cell tower was a baseball stadium. And this was a minor league stadium. It was called Skylands Park in Newton, New Jersey. If you are familiar with the New York area, Route 84 runs from Connecticut all the way east through Danbury and Brewster, New York, and that whole area. So it's just south of Route 84. Again, about an hour outside New York City. It's about 100 yards from the New Jersey State Fair. And this stadium was built in 1993 at a cost of about $11.5 million. 28 acres of land, 4,000 seats, parking for a couple of thousand cars, 46,000 square feet of buildings, batting cages, a couple of commercial kitchens, 18 luxury boxes, bona fide minor league baseball stadium. And this stadium set league attendance records, maybe because there isn't that much going on in that part of New Jersey. I don't know. But it was setting league attendance records. Now, a year after it was built, it went into bankruptcy with $26 million in debt. Don't ask me how they did that, because it only cost $11.5 million to build. The folks that bought it continued to operate it for all of those years. It was the New Jersey Cardinals. It was later the Sussex Skyhawks. And then the husband died, and they lost their minor league franchise. And because of the location, there were no municipal services. So there was a giant holding tank for the you-know-what that had a 10-year contract to be emptied, and there were no toilets being flushed. And just the contract to empty this holding tank was $110,000 a year.
Oh my gosh.
So no revenue coming in. This thing is bleeding cash. The wife just wants to move to Florida to be close to her kids. This is post 2008. So she hands it over to a realtor who throws it up on the MLS, folds his arms and waits. Now, I may not know a lot about baseball stadiums, but I'm pretty sure that's not the way to market a baseball stadium. So, so they got a cash offer of $1.5 million, which they declined, and then they got a financed. Oh, they were asking $2.2 million. So this was already a fire sale price. They got a financed offer at $1.5 million, a cash offer at $1.5 million, which they declined, and a financed offer at $1.8 million, which they accepted. Eventually, their financing fell through. So now they're 2 years into this listing, no activity. It's the bottom of the market. It's like 2012. And so we looked at the asset, and we were not looking for a baseball stadium at all. But Mark and I looked at it, and I said, the breakup value of this thing is probably greater than the purchase price. So if we look, for example, so we offered $950,000 in cash, which they accepted. Now we'll go back to the cell tower. The cell tower had $50,000 a year in revenue, with Sprint, Verizon, and T-Mobile all leasing space on that tower. And so if you take $50,000 and divide it by 7% cap rate, you get a number that's a little over $700,000. So the value of the cell tower alone was about $700,000, and we offered $950,000 for the whole stadium, which included the cell tower. So we said, okay, we've got ourselves a stadium for less than the cost of a one-bedroom condo. What do we do now? So we said, all right, like even before we closed on it, we started, looking, well, who would want a stadium? We had all kinds of weird and wacky ideas. There was a lot of parking. There was, electricity. We could do a drive-in movie. We could do all kinds of stuff. But we ultimately said, it's going to be somebody who loves baseball that really wants this. So we started looking at major league players. Would you want to run a spring training camp for nerdy kids out of New York that need something to do for the summer, or like anything, right? We found a college team that paid us to run, I think 13 or 18 games. And, they brought in more clay and leveled it. It wasn't laser level like it would be in the majors, but it was good enough. And we closed on this for $250,000. Now, we found a guy who was maybe a potential buyer. Now, what's happened in Major League Baseball is the number of rounds in the draft has declined. It used to be like 120 rounds in the draft. And for the baseball fanatics out there, I might misquote the number. I think it's like down to 40 rounds in the draft. It's really low. So there's a lot of really good players that are never going to make it into the majors. So there was a need to expand minor league ball. And this guy already owned a stadium in Camden, New Jersey, and he was looking to restart the Can-Am League. He said, I might want your stadium, but in order to restart the league, I need 8 stadiums minimum. So you're 1/8 of my problem. And we said, okay. Would you like a right of first refusal for that stadium? He said, yeah, that's a great idea. So, so we agreed on that. And I said, we'd like some amount of cash, for that, some consideration. He said, how much do you want? I said, how about 250,000? And he said, okay, that's no problem. He said, but I would like some interest on that 250 grand. We said, how much do you want? He said, 8%. We said, done. So for 8% interest on 250 grand, we bought a stadium. And you would never imagine that something like that would be possible. We literally bought it for like 2 cents on the dollar or some crazy number like that. We eventually we held it for about, I don't know, 8 or 9 months and ended up selling it for about $800,000. So and this is after having sold the cell tower. So there was a reasonable profit on it. We still gave the buyer a great deal. And the lessons in that were very simple. It was about exercising creativity and seeing the hidden value in an asset. And that, yes, there would be some heavy lifting required, that the daycare that was operating in one of the buildings would, need some special attention because we needed that revenue and so on. But at the end of the day, we recognized that this was not our wheelhouse. We were not going to be long-term holders of a stadium, and that this was just a quick flip more than anything. But we recognized the value in it because we could see the breakup value of the various elements in the assets. And we took it right down to, well, what if we had to take out the batting cages and sell the batting cages as a separate asset? Like, we really were prepared to pick it apart. Now, in the end, we didn't have to do that. We still got a good, clean exit, but we recognized it was worth more in pieces than the sum of its parts.
One of your mentors, George Ross, says that you always have to know what the life cycle of an asset is, where you are in that life cycle, and what your responsibility is, or what you're supposed to do in that cycle. Do you know what's still going on with that stadium now? Do you have any current day awareness of it?
That's a good question. In fact, so I'm actually going to be in New York next week. I'll check it out. I'll let you know.
Photo, please.
I'm not going to be far from there, actually. So yeah, I'll let you know.
Very, very cool. So before we go into what you said on Wednesday was the second opportunity, kind of a more modern day example of what you've seen as best investment class, what were the strategic byproducts that having such a massive win was able to do for you? Where did that take your career or your partnerships or your insight?
Well, I think the first thing it did, it took my thinking out of the realm of, oh, this is a fantasy, this is nonsense, into, oh, wow, like this is real. You can do this. Like, these opportunities are there. It's like walking down the sidewalk and you see a $1,000 bill. How many people would actually even recognize that it's a real $1,000 bill and pick it up? A lot of people would pass by and say, no, it can't be.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really being willing to take a look. And one of the things that's happened over the past decade and a bit, which is still true today, and often people ask me, how do I find my deals? And the honest answer is, I have no idea, because we don't hunt, never have. And every single deal has come to us in one form or another. And so it's really being positioned in the marketplace so that these deals do come to you. That's the key. And this next opportunity that we're still in the middle of, we're living it right now, is another one of those. We were not in the hunt for that. And we're land developers. We're quite comfortable developing land and going and doing subdivision plans and master plans and planned use developments and zoning and all that stuff. We're very comfortable with that. But this one was way above what we were looking for. And it really just kind of fell in our lap. In fact, it was one of those ones where, again, it was like the $1,000 bill. At first, we dismissed it. I dismissed it. I said, oh, it's too big. It's too complex. It'll take too long. All of these excuses, and literally let it go. And then a couple of weeks later, said, you know what, we can actually do this. It's just another, it's like adding a comma or a couple of zeros to the end of it. It's no different. And I'm glad we did. You see, when it comes to land development, the value of land is linked to what you can do with it, because dirt is dirt. Now, if it's agricultural land, pretty much anywhere in the country, it'll be somewhere between 3 and 10,000 an acre. If you can put a residential subdivision on it, might be, I don't know, $200,000 to $400,000 an acre. If you can put a 50-story building on it, might be several million an acre, but it's all the same dirt. Of course, you've got to have the demand to support that. You're not going to put a 40-story building out in the middle of a cornfield, but assuming the demand is there, the entitlement, what you're allowed to do with that land, will in large measure determine the value. I call that the land use multiplier, where you can take something that you might buy for 3 to 10 grand an acre and get 100-fold, maybe even more increase in its value simply by getting it entitled. And then, of course, when you add the improvements and all the rest, then that number goes up from there. So we acquired 1,783 acres on the edge of Colorado Springs. Now, that's 77 million square feet, a property with a perimeter that's more than 7 miles. Wrap your head around that. When we went to first visit the property, we were there for hours. We didn't see the whole thing. So it's a massive, massive property. Now, a lot of people think, well, okay, a big piece of property, it's a cattle ranch, fine. What's your thesis? Why that dirt and not some other dirt? Because, these cattle ranches can be pretty big. And if it was agricultural land and cattle grazing on it, why is this land going to be more valuable? And these would be all great questions to ask. We never go into an opportunity with a very broad general thesis, like, I'm going to build another couple hundred units in Atlanta because Atlanta is growing. That's not enough. That's too general. There's got to be a specific reason. In our case, our immediate neighbor is Schriever Air Force Base, which is U.S. Space Command. That's not a commodity. There's one of those, not 50. And this is a fairly large base, not physically because it doesn't have a runway. It's got a bunch of antennas pointed at the sky. There's 7,000 people go through the front gates of that every day. So the location was unique. And we acquired this property for essentially 23 cents a square foot. Post-annexation, post-entitlement, it should value between $4 to $5 a square foot. That's a 20 times multiple on its value. And that's just for getting it entitled and annexed into the city. Once you start putting in the infrastructure, the roads, the arterials, all of the infrastructure that's needed for what will be dozens and dozens of planned use developments, then the value goes up from there. So it was really an opportunity to create a master plan community out of nothing, out of just an idea. That was it. And that's what's unique, is to create those opportunities. They don't find you. You have to manufacture them out of a concept, because there's nothing with a flashing red light on it saying, I'm a deal, come get me. Right? There just isn't. I mean, yeah, there might be a sign out there from a broker that says, land for sale, but how do you know that's a deal?
They say land development and development in general is the most entrepreneurial of all real estate endeavors, because you're going to create something truly new, whether it's redevelopment or whether it's true new construction development. You are going to both convince a community and the investors and the future customers that this is the new thing that you want. There's no true proof of concept. No one has put that building right there or put that community, the master plan community, right there. You're going to be the first one to do it. So for you, knowing that these massive wins are created when the stars align, when the right opportunity comes to you and you find the thread that says this is a high value opportunity, what is the what's the thing that gets your entrepreneurial mind clear that this is the one we want to act on more than, say, the next 1,783 acre parcel right next door? How do you know it's that one?
Well, I mean, in that case, it was partly the location that was unique. Uh, this particular property, I mean, you don't know until you go through the due diligence. In fact, we weren't sure. So we had our very first meeting with the county because it's in El Paso County. And at the meeting with the county, planners from the city showed up to the meeting uninvited. And we said, okay, this is interesting. And the message to us was, well, we're here from the city and we're here to let you know that if you choose to annex into the city, we have services that could be available to you, specifically water, sewer, electric, which might be useful. And we would be very supportive of an annexation petition. So that was our first meeting with the county, having the city show up uninvited. So, so we said, okay, maybe there's something here. So why would you want us? Why would you want us to be in the city? Well, they told us how important Schriever Air Force Base was. And they said they didn't want the risk because we're big enough that we could incorporate. So they didn't want another community popping up between Colorado Springs and Schriever. That was important to them.
Wow.
So if that land gets annexed, that prevents that from happening because Schriever is so important to the city of Colorado Springs. Now, since we closed, we've had the opportunity to have direct conversations with the leadership at Schriever. Now, not me. I don't have those relationships, but we were able to attract the right people into our partner team who could have those conversations. So, for example, one of the gentlemen, his father was the former county commissioner. His wife is the current county commissioner. He can have any member of city council over at his house for barbecue, including the mayor, and they'll show up. They won't do that for Victor. So, when they call, the mayor will answer. If I call, who's Victor? Well, some dude in Canada, right? So it's a matter of attracting the right people. We attracted another gentleman who he had sold a defense contracting business for a very large sum of money. He's built the defense incubator in Colorado Springs. So there's a whole ton of defense startup companies developing defense technologies on his campus, about 2,000 people on his campus that he built in the downtown core. Citizen of the Year in 2019, very well connected. I've been in his office and seen lots of guys with plenty of stars on their lapels coming through the front lobby. And so he can have those conversations, and as a team we have. So when we talk with Schriever and the leadership at Schriever, it's, well, what do you need? And we learned from that conversation that they're out of military construction budget. So they need to add more missions to the base. The only way they can do that is to move admin functions off base. If there was an office building outside of our front gates, we'd be your tenant. Okay, cool. What else do you need? Well, we have 7,000 people that come through our front gates every day. A daycare would be fabulous. Wonderful. What else do you need? Well, the closest hotel is at the airport, and then there's a few hotels downtown 30 minutes away. Hotel would be wonderful. Awesome. What else do you need? You see how this goes, right? And now you're hearing firsthand what an economic anchor in the community is really, it creates the opportunity for you to solve problems. And someone who's in another location can't do that. You need rental housing. Awesome. How much? Single family, towns, apartments? What would you like? So we can engage in those conversations directly. And that's a unique position. And it all happens. The only way it happens is by attracting the right people and approaching these projects with no ego whatsoever so that you can attract the right people. And, today, as people are looking at our project and seeing the finish line to annexation, we're starting to attract unsolicited offers for investment in the project. And we're not even out there raising capital right now. People are wanting to come join our project. And we got an unsolicited offer this week, and yet we're not out there raising money. Now, we will need money at some point, but right now we're not raising money. So I don't know, it's a unique opportunity. To me, this is a legacy project. This is one of those projects that eventually could be 8,500, 9,000 rooftops, commercial, retail, schools, police, fire, industrial, office, like electric substations, the whole 9 yards. And this is a couple of decade project where we literally have the ability to create new opportunities almost at will. So it's very much a legacy project.
Knowing that we're almost at time, I'd love to hear as we close out. You mentioned that approaching this with no ego is how you start to learn the things that will turn this from a win into a grand slam home run, massive win. Once these wins are on your resume, how do you avoid falling into the ego trap that then limits the future wins from coming?
I don't know that it limits the future wins. I think it just further builds your position in the marketplace so that more opportunities come your way rather than the opposite. I think people will say, okay, Victor did this. This one's kind of like that. Maybe he's interested in that one too. So I think because not everybody has the mindset of being a principal in a project. There's a lot of folks that are just thinking more, I'll say with a broker mentality, say, well, I have this thing, maybe I can wholesale it to them. Or maybe I can, maybe facilitate a transaction and get a few pennies out of it on the side or something like that. There's a lot of people out there with that mindset. So I think you actually do become a magnet for more opportunity rather than the reverse.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for two great stories. This has been thoroughly enjoyable. And for the listener, be sure to follow us at ystreetcapital.com so you can see some of the way that these both historic and very present day wins play their way out. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Robbie.